Hi and welcome. I see folks are still coming into the webinar, so we'll get started in just about 30 seconds. Again, welcome. Hello, everyone. We're glad that so many of you have joined us to introduce this case, Dunn v. Wisconsin PSC, which is a new lawsuit filed by 15 amazing Wisconsinites fighting to secure their constitutional rights to a safe climate and a healthy future. My name is Tony Wilkin Gibbard. I'm the executive director of Midwest Environmental Advocates, and I'm one of the attorneys on this case. And we have a lot that we want to talk to you about, a lot that we want to share. So I'll move right into going over our agenda and introducing our panelists. This evening, in the next hour, we want to tell you a little bit more about this case. We want to tell you about our 15 amazing clients, the plaintiffs in this matter. We want to talk to you about the impact of climate change on the health of young people, which is really the crux of this case and this litigation. And then we'll have some time for some discussion with the panelists and some questions from all of you. So I'd invite folks over the course of the webinar to put your questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll look for them there in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so and get to as many of those questions as we can. So as I said, let me introduce our panelists tonight. With us is my colleague at Midwest Environmental Advocates, Skylar Harris, who is an attorney and the Climate Justice Fellow at MEA. Skylar's advocacy at MEA focuses on this litigation and on other advocacy and litigation with respect to oil pipelines and energy infrastructure and transportation infrastructure. We're also really glad to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Patz, who is the Vilas Distinguished Professor and the John P. Holton Chair of Health and Environment at the University of Wisconsin in the Nelson Institute and in the Population Health Sciences Department. Jonathan was elected as a member of the National Academy of Medicine, and he is the former health co-chair for the first U.S. National Climate Assessment. He was also a lead author for the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which shared in the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize. We're also very glad to be joined by Nate Bellinger, who is a supervising staff attorney at Our Children's Trust. He's been at Our Children's Trust since its founding in 2010, been a driving force in that organization. And he was also the lead attorney in Held v. Montana, which was the first case in US history to bring constitutional climate claims to trial. And he secured a landmark victory in that case, affirming the rights of young Montanans to a safe climate. And last and certainly not least, we're joined by Karina Dunn, who is a 17-year-old climate leader from La Crosse County, and she's the lead plaintiff in this case. Karina is president of her 4-H club, and in 4-H, she has won the Wisconsin Kid Wind Challenge, which is a hands-on competition where students build small-scale wind and solar structures. And she's also been awarded 3 Bloomberg Philanthropies Climate Action Fund grants for several environmental projects in her community. So that's our panel, and I'm really happy to turn it over to Nate Bellinger to tell you more about this case.
All right, thanks, Tony. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It's a great pleasure to have a chance to share with you some of what we're up to in Wisconsin. So to start, I want to introduce Our Children's Trust for those of you who aren't familiar with our work. We're a nonprofit law firm, and our mission is to empower young people to secure their fundamental rights to a healthy climate. We do this by representing children and youth in bringing litigation against their governments. So we exclusively represent youth, and we exclusively bring cases against governments. We do this work in various states, like now most recently Wisconsin, at the federal level and internationally as well. As Tony said, we've been doing this work since 2010, and this Wisconsin case really builds on the other cases that we have litigated over the years. Some of you may be familiar with our federal case, Juliana v. United States. And then more recently, we've had great wins in Montana, as Tony mentioned, and also Hawaii. So we're excited to build on that history and bring our work to Wisconsin now. Next slide, please. So the case we're here to talk about this evening was filed in August, so recently filed. We're pleased at our Children's Trust to be co-counsel on the case with Tony and Skylar at Midwest Environmental Advocates. And the case was filed on behalf of 15 children from across Wisconsin, ranging in ages from 8 to 17. And the goal is to protect their rights secured by Wisconsin's Constitution. So the defendants who were suing in this case are the Wisconsin Public Service Commission and the Wisconsin Legislature. Next slide, please. So we have identified these as the key defendants because the legislature has passed and the Public Service Commission is implementing laws that actually prevent the Public Service Commission from looking at air pollution or climate change when determining whether they should issue permits for fossil fuel projects. So the Public Service Commission regulates the electricity sector, and as they are reviewing permits, deciding whether or not to approve new gas-fired power plants, for example, they are legally prohibited from considering air pollution and climate change. So they end up approving these projects, completely turning a blind eye to the impacts from climate change. We're also challenging laws that cap how much renewable energy the Public Service Commission can require utilities to bring online to meet energy needs in Wisconsin. So these laws collectively are really locking in and perpetuating an electricity sector in Wisconsin that is dominated by fossil fuels, even though the state has its own mandate to decarbonize the electricity sector by 2050. So these laws are really getting in the way of that, and it's our goal to get rid of them. So next slide, please. And we can really see the impact of these laws when you look at the composition of Wisconsin's electricity sector. The state still gets 75% of its electricity from fossil fuel resources like coal and gas, even though right now renewable energy is widely available. It's the cheapest form of electricity, but notwithstanding that, the Public Service Commission continues to review and approve permits for new gas-fired power plants. And so these laws and the resulting fossil fuel dominated electricity sector in Wisconsin are, of course, responsible for really significant levels of greenhouse gas emissions that are causing and exacerbating climate change with various impacts in Wisconsin, including floods, heat waves, environmental degradation of rivers, forests, and other ecosystems. Contributing to air pollution, from wildfire smoke and from the fossil fuel power plants themselves. Next slide, please. So turning to the law, we are arguing that these laws that I've identified and the resulting climate impacts are violating plaintiffs' rights under Article 1, Section 1 of Wisconsin's Constitution, which protects the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So our goal is to prove that these laws are harming plaintiffs' health, safety, personal security, bodily integrity, all of which are protected under this provision of the Constitution. And we're also arguing that there is an inherent right under Article 1, Section 1 to a stable climate system. That's a right that courts in Montana and Hawaii have also recently recognized as fundamental constitutional right. And then next slide, please. We are also arguing that these laws are violating Wisconsin's public trust doctrine, which is also codified in the Constitution. And it requires the state to kind of proactively protect essential public resources, including waters, from substantial impairment and environmental degradation. And unfortunately, we're seeing how climate change is already having significant impacts on Wisconsin's rivers and lakes, changes in drought conditions, flood conditions, algal blooms, and other impacts that we know will all get worse if the fossil fuel pollution continues unabated. So that's kind of a quick high-level overview of the laws that we're challenging and the rights that we are invoking here under Wisconsin's Constitution. And I'm going to turn it back to Tony now to talk a little bit about the amazing plaintiffs in the case.
Thank you so much, Nate. Thanks for the overview. Just to get us started, I'll introduce folks to Midwest Environmental Advocates. If you don't know, MEA is a nonprofit environmental law center based here in Wisconsin, and we combine the power of law with the resolve of communities facing environmental injustice to secure and protect the rights of all people to healthy water, land, and air. And like our Children's Trust, we're a nonprofit environmental law firm that litigates on behalf of directly impacted individuals. That is, we don't represent our own organization or members. We work to bring our legal expertise to empower individuals and communities that are directly impacted by environmental threats here in Wisconsin. So we've been doing that for over a quarter of a century on issues that affect Wisconsinites like PFAS contamination, degraded water quality, and build out of fossil fuel infrastructure. Um, Climate change certainly is the predominant issue of our time. And as we'll talk more about tonight, it's an issue that especially impacts young people. And so the opportunity to get to partner with Nate and Our Children's Trust to combine our two organizations' expertise and relationships in this way to bring the perspectives and the stories of this generation of Wisconsinites and how they're being impacted by greenhouse gas emissions and climate change to our state's court system fits at the very heart of our mission. And we're really proud to get to do this work in partnership with our Children's Trust and with our plaintiffs. So yeah, I want to tell you a little bit more about our youth plaintiffs, and I wish that we had time for me to tell you about all 15 of them and tell you their stories. So suffice it to say, as a group, they bring a wide range of perspectives and represent a wide range of impacts that young people in Wisconsin are facing right now as a result of climate change. They also bring unique stories of courage and resilience and hope. But because our time is limited, I can just tell you about a few of them and just some snapshots of what they have brought to the litigation. One of our young plaintiffs, Lucy, is a 17-year-old from Wausau, Wisconsin. That's in the northern half of the state. And Lucy and her family are big cross country skiers. Lucy has been skiing her entire life and her family for generations. But that's a tradition that Lucy has seen slip away from her as winters warm and we have decreased snowfall in Wisconsin. One thing that Lucy mentioned to us was how much she loves the American Birkebeiner, or the Birkie as we call it. And that's a huge ski race and festival that takes place in northern Wisconsin that draws thousands from across the country and really even some of the best cross country skiers in the world. And Lucy said that that tradition for her, the Birkie, is like Christmas because of the sense of joy and camaraderie and community that she's gotten at that event throughout her childhood, throughout her life. But in recent years, the Birkie has been, in some cases, canceled or shortened because even in northern Wisconsin, we're experiencing such decreased snowfall that there's no guarantee that there will be snow on the ground. Two of our other plaintiffs come from Wisconsin farming families, Ted and Charlie, and they have seen their families' farms impacted by extreme rain events and runoff, by increased periods of drought. And they have found themselves with their families questioning whether they can carry on Wisconsin's farming tradition in the face of a rapidly changing climate and in the face of our state itself pumping more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, making that problem worse. We also have as a plaintiff Wazakone Champagne and her brother and two sisters, and they have spoken about a number of impacts to traditional foods and medicines that they depend on as Anishinaabe youth. They've talked, for instance, about the fact that cold water fisheries are disappearing in Wisconsin, and it's unclear whether they will be able to fish walleye into their adulthood as their ancestors have done for generations. Many of our clients also have health conditions that are connected to climate change, like asthma and vector-borne illnesses like Lyme disease. All of these plaintiffs collectively are asking the courts to do something. They're asking the courts to declare the statutes that Nate talked about unconstitutional under our state constitution, to prohibit the Public Service Commission from enforcing those statutes and restoring our state's ability to consider air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions when deciding whether to approve new fossil fuel electric generation. And by affirming those constitutional rights, it would have a very, very important impact. It would mean that those legal barriers that Nate mentioned would be removed, and that Wisconsin would be on a path to meet our state's clean energy goals and transition to 100% renewable energy to help contribute to a safe future. So I've told you a little bit about our clients and what they're asking for, but it would be better yet if you heard from one of our clients. So I want to turn it over to Karina Dunn so she can talk to you about her story and why she got involved in this case. Karina, go
Hello,
ahead.
everyone. My name is Karina Dunn, and I would like to talk a little bit about how I've been affected by climate change and some of the ways that I help mitigate these effects in my community. So to start, I am a big skier. I've skied my entire life with my family. It is something that we enjoy every single winter. I have sisters. My father snowboards. We spend almost every single weekend skiing at my local ski hill. However, only one generation ago, the snow was abundant in Wisconsin. I would hear from my grandparents, from great aunts and uncles about how great the snow is in Wisconsin. You don't even have to go out west, just stay in Wisconsin. But my high school ski season has been cut short to only 5 weeks each year. That is insane. When I was younger, our ski season was almost 8 to 9 weeks, and now it is very short, only longer than a month. And these ski hills, they're now burning more fossil fuels to stay open and create snow, also using our local waterways. And all of this is a cycle which speeds up climate change. The activities and traditions that I love are now creating more climate change and more fossil fuels into my environment. Additionally, with this, each summer I live in fear of another 50 or 100 flood event happening. I've experienced many of these in my lifetime. I'll speak on one later that forced me to move out of my childhood home, away from my extended family, my grandparents, my cousins, and myself and my fellow plaintiffs. We've lived through so many of these in our short lifetime. We should have never experienced these at the rate that we are. And kind of on the flip side of this, I'm president of my 4-H club, as Tony mentioned. I lead youth in my community to learn about STEM, renewable energy, and climate change through engineering a small-scale wind turbine. We have won international awards and state awards for our extensive research in engineering into renewable energy. I've brought this club into my school. It has had a great response, and this is an activity that I truly do enjoy. I love learning more myself and sharing with youth the ways that we can mitigate the effects of climate change on a small scale that is truly feasible. Also within my community, I have designed and written grants for multiple international projects. Just this summer, I designed a camp for youth to experience healthy living in the community, purchasing local, going to local farms, growing healthy food. Also sustainability within music. I'm a musician. I play violin. I've enjoyed violin my entire life with my sisters, but looking at how that affects climate change in ways that we can be more sustainable through that. Just this past weekend, I finished up one of my last grants. We did a complete shoreline restoration of the Mississippi River, a waterway that most Wisconsinites cherish so greatly. I love the Mississippi River. I swim on it all summer with my siblings and my cousins. We paddleboard. We just love to swim on it. We love to go fishing. And giving back to the community in this way, the waterway that we cherish so greatly that has been eroded by climate change, eroded by extreme weather events such as flooding, extreme winds, is something that I truly cherish and I love doing with my community to extend the education of others, teach youth about ways that we can mitigate these effects. And then finally, I will just end with all 17 years that I've lived in Wisconsin. My decisions unfortunately have to consider climate change and fossil fuel usage and the activities that I truly love and dedicate my time to. I love to play tennis. I'm finishing up my high school season right now. I love playing over the summer, but I have to realize if I go out in the middle of the day, it's going to be extremely hot. There's going to be wildfire smoke. I have to change my schedule around this, around the environment that is so quickly changing. I love swimming on the Mississippi River, as I mentioned, and then also enjoying time on the farm with my family. My grandparents have a tree farm, and I love to spend time out there. However, it is incredibly hot during the summer. I have to change my schedule around that. And so I must consider all the effects on my environment, on my activities, and change my activities due to this. And a little bit later, I'll talk about why I decided to join this lawsuit and fight back against our state for the ways they are harming myself, my siblings, and all of the other fellow plaintiffs in this case.
Thanks so much, Karina. Incredibly powerful, and look forward to hearing more in just a little bit. But right now, I want to turn it over to Dr. Jonathan Patz to talk a little bit more about health impacts as a result of climate change. As we've talked about, the health impacts to Wisconsin youth are really central to this litigation. Jonathan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Tony. Let me share my screen now.
Is it working for you?
Okay, here we go.
Great.
I had to find which screen I was on. I have a couple monitors here. Okay, so how does that look to you right now? Looks good?
That looks great.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about climate change impacts on children. And I'll just jump right in and say that the risks begin right from fetal development, that pregnant women exposed to extreme heat have risk for preterm birth, stillbirths, congenital anomalies, low birth weight, and these lead to lifelong consequences. The other aspect of heat is we know that learning is impaired from heat. This is a study out of Harvard showing that young people's learning and cognitive performance decline with very hot weather, especially in schools that don't have air conditioning. Other aspects, of course, with heat come extreme droughts. And this is a study out of the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that shows that because of climate change's impact on fuel aridity, in other words, it's just so dry that that wildfires are much more likely to happen. We're seeing a double the amount of wildfires that we experience. And that has implications for exposure to smoke. You can see the wildfires from the heat wave from the Northwest in the summer of 2021 spread across the country. Wisconsin was greatly affected. And what's really important to understand from a child's perspective is that studies show that children are especially sensitive to wildfire smoke. The fine particulate matter, the PM 2.5, is 10 times more harmful to young children ages 0 to 5. So that's a big concern among pediatrics. Another thing that not only is heat a risk for pregnant women, but preterm birth and low birth weight is associated with exposure to wildfire smoke. This is a study from Australia. but this is happening in other parts of the world where this is documented. So heat and wildfire smoke, bad for children breathing it and bad for exposure to pregnant women. This is just to show you how bad the wildfire smoke was in Wisconsin. Back in 2003, Madison and Milwaukee had air pollution levels in the, very unhealthy range. And just this year, we were in the unhealthy range from the smoke coming down from Canada. So this is something we're going to be seeing more of, and it's an exposure that is harmful to children. Another harmful airborne exposure is ragweed pollen. And we're seeing in northern latitudes, especially up here in Wisconsin and Minnesota, the extension of ragweed pollen season is 2 weeks longer. So that's a risk for asthmatics. You can see we've increased, Wisconsin is 1 degree warmer, and there's more CO2 that CO2 fertilization of these plants. So that's a problem for asthmatics. Just one quick note that with climate change, you don't just get warming and drought, you get extreme to the water cycle. And you can see Wisconsin is in the statistically significant, very high risk for more flooding. We see 7 inches more rainfall than we did 50 years ago. There are studies that document extreme rainfall event and diarrheal disease from water contamination in wells, and this affects children. And one last health concern, and it's a big one, and there's more and more evidence of young people reporting anxiety, depression, and other forms of mental distress from climate change. This is an entire journal issue related to this. And just briefly, because this lawsuit is challenging the PSC for its practices, there was a study that showed if Wisconsin went to in-state clean energy, and that's over here on the right side, it is totally feasible for Wisconsin to do that. And should Wisconsin choose this low carbon scenario, you would save almost 2,000 lives every year, tens of thousands of cases of asthma exacerbation, hundreds of heart attacks avoided. So this is it's a win-win, and that's a lot of money saved as far as avoided mortality and health costs. So I'll just conclude by saying that climate change and its causes, primarily from burning fossil fuels, directly and indirectly harm children, and these harms will worsen unless we quickly transition to a fossil-free future. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I will stop sharing right now.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate how you're able to highlight both the risks and the harms, but also the benefits if these rights are vindicated and the state takes action. So I appreciate that. So I want to remind folks that feel free to pop questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we should have some time before the end of the hour to get to some of your questions, but I'll start with some questions for the panelists here. Karina, I do want to start with you. You alluded to this. Was there a specific moment or experience that really galvanized your resolve to take action? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so in the past few years, my family underwent an incredibly traumatic and overall life-changing experience. The home that I grew up in, I spent my entire childhood with my siblings, my cousins, my grandparents. It was no longer safe due to a massive boulder being dislodged by climate-driven freeze-thaw cycles, and this dislodged boulder tumbled down from the bluff above my home into my backyard. It cleared trees and land in the process and made my home very unsafe to live in. And myself and my family, we felt very unsafe in the childhood home that I wish to live forever. I wish to bring my children back to this amazing home. It overlooked the Mississippi River. I loved it. But we had to move away from this home into a new school district, a new community, almost an hour away from my family. And overall, this traumatic event that really did open my eyes to climate change and how drastically my life was being impacted by it. But it didn't moving away from the unsafe living situation, it did not end my afflictions caused by climate change, but it rather made me look at all of the different areas of my home, or not of my home, of my life that are affected by climate change. Tennis, I have to move practices till late at night, early in the morning, gardening with my family. We've had years where our garden has been entirely washed out by extreme flood events, the gardens that we put so much work and love into each year. And also spending time in the Mississippi River, the area of water that Wisconsinites love so dearly and spend so much time on each summer. Just last summer, we weren't able to access the dock that we use until July. June and July is a big time when I spend time on the river, and my abilities to access the waterways are being cut short each year due to extreme flooding directly caused by fossil fuel burning and climate change. So those are a few of the biggest things that really struck me as life-changing to participate and to be the lead plaintiff in this lawsuit. But also, I've done lots of research into other ways that myself and other youth are harmed by climate change, such as PFAS, gas burning, gas burning ranges in the kitchen. I've given speeches at my local Earth Fair, made my community aware of all of these terrible things that are happening to youth and that youth are being plagued by with not even knowing. And altogether, the ways that I've been caused and the ways that I've looked outwardly into how youth are being harmed by climate change caused me to take action and be a part of this lawsuit.
Thank you for saying all of that. And I want to shift to Nate here for a second. Nate, you've worked at Our Children's Trust and represented other amazing young people like Karina in a number of cases. And in those cases, you've taken the approach of not challenging a particular project, a particular power plant, but actually gone after statutes and laws. So could you talk to us about why you've taken that approach at Our Children's Trust? I'm going to work in a question from the chat too. Someone asks, why sue government entities and not fossil fuel corporations and industry directly?
Yeah, thanks, Tony, and thanks for the question in the chat. I think those questions get at really why the approach that Our Children's Trust has taken since 2010 is unique, and why the cases, including this most recent Wisconsin case, are different than kind of traditional, environmental cases. So to start with kind of the why we challenge laws as opposed to kind of individual projects. I mean, in Wisconsin and really everywhere, there are constantly new fossil fuel projects being proposed. We call it kind of whack-a-mole. So you block one project and another one pops up. If you stop a power plant over here, then a new power plant is proposed somewhere else. So we're trying to kind of seek systemic change and have the laws that are allowing this ongoing promotion and approval of fossil fuel projects to continue, just to have those laws declared unconstitutional and have courts set standards for where governments need to be moving with their energy transition towards 100% renewable energy. So rather than having to bring dozens and dozens of lawsuits challenging every individual project, we try to seek kind of these systemic remedies that I think are actually more efficient, both from our litigation strategy, and I think ultimately more beneficial for governments too, because it would allow them to do kind of more holistic planning in terms of their decarbonization strategy, rather than trying to figure out how to replace energy from each project that's blocked. So our goal is to seek these systemic remedies that cannot be undone, which is where the constitutional rights come in. By tying these remedies to constitutional rights, we seek durable remedies that can't be undone as soon as administrations come and go. In terms of why we focus on governments, by no means are the fossil fuel companies innocent. I'm not trying to suggest that. But everything that the fossil fuel companies are doing to build power plants in this instance, which is what we're really focusing on, they are doing it with permits from the government. And so if the government stopped issuing those permits, and stopped in many cases actually encouraging the development of fossil fuels, like the governments are not kind of passive in this process. They are affirmatively promoting and encouraging the development of fossil fuels in most instances. So if the government stopped that conduct, stopped encouraging and permitting fossil fuel development, none of those fossil fuel companies would be able to build those projects. So that's why we try to kind of stop it, again, that government level systemic approach rather than project by project.
Thanks for that. Skylar, you've been there quietly. Thanks for your patience. I want to throw a question to you. Could you talk a little bit about what it would mean here in Wisconsin if the PSC regained the ability to consider greenhouse gas emissions? What would that mean for decisions moving forward?
Yeah, of course. So when the PSC is approving new fossil fuel facilities, it must first consider the public interest. And in doing so, it considers things like economics and the wants and needs of the community. And when it considers those wants and needs, it takes comments from the community, and a major portion of those comments includes concerns about air pollution and climate change. But because of the statutory prohibition on the consideration of air pollution, the PSC is basically throwing these concerns by the wayside because it is not allowed to consider them. And it has cited these laws in several of its decisions, saying, we would have listened to you, community members, but alas, here is a statute that prohibits us from doing so. So hopefully in the future, when we strike down this law, this will give the PSC the ability to consider the community's concerns going forward. And if it fails to do so, those are decisions that then can be challenged on a more individual basis. Going forward, we have seen a lot of activity at the PSC recently with, expansions and continued building of fossil fuel facilities down in Beloit, and Paris and Oak Creek gas plants. And so those decisions have been, made under these current statutes. And hopefully in the future, when, these utilities are proposing to build new generation within the state, because of the fact that the PSC will be able to consider air pollution at those points in time, they'll be able to strike down the proposals that involve new fossil fuel generation and instead push the utilities to build new renewable energy generation.
Thanks, Skylar. I appreciate that perspective about what communities and groups are saying to the Public Service Commission right now. Jonathan, you're a member of, I believe, several organizations that represent the perspective of healthcare providers and the medical field. And some of those groups have been involved in advocating before the PSC. Can you talk a little bit about how the medical community in Wisconsin is responding to climate change? What is the medical community seeing, and how is it using its voice?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Health practitioners from across the state have come together. There's a very active group called Healthy Climate Wisconsin. It's doctors, nurses, physical therapists, health professionals from across other walks of the profession. And they are really concerned by the disregard for the environmental health impact of these power plants. You can't just build a power plant and say, aha, we've got electricity and here's the financial cost and here's the the electric power, without considering the environmental and health costs. And that is just paramount to going forward. So there are doctors and nurses coming forward advocating on behalf of their patients, saying, breathing downwind from a power plant. It's not only is it not ethical, but it's especially not ethical now that renewables and batteries are the cheapest way to generate electricity. That was not true 6 or 7 years ago, but now we're in a completely different economic landscape. So there's virtually no excuse to try to develop new power sources that are clean and healthy. So that's what the doctors and nurses are doing, and if we can move this forward, it would be fantastic for the health of children and the health of all their patients that they're advocating for.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm gonna, even though we're not technically in the portion where we're taking audience questions, I'm gonna just kind of continue to sprinkle them in here because I'm seeing some good ones. And one person asked, "How can you fight Trump and the Supreme Court during the lawsuit?" And so I'm gonna ask you to talk maybe a little bit about work that our Children's Trust is doing on the federal level, but also maybe ask you to talk about why in this moment it's also important that we focus on state constitutional rights and state level actions, like we're doing in this lawsuit.
Yeah, so with respect to Trump, we, in addition to the Wisconsin case, we also have a case pending against Trump and several federal agencies. It's known as Lighthizer v. Trump. And there are 22 youth plaintiffs in that case from, most of them are from Montana actually, and several from Hawaii, Washington or Oregon, California, Florida. So a group of youth have challenged 3 of Trump's executive orders that are unleashing fossil fuels, blocking renewable energy, dismantling climate science. So we are also suing Trump. And that case is pending right now in federal court in Montana. We had a hearing just about 2 weeks ago on a motion for preliminary injunction where we're trying to have these executive orders blocked promptly and to stop them from continuing to be implemented. So we're waiting right now from a decision from that judge. And either way, we're just going to, we're going to keep fighting at the federal level for sure. Lots of challenge-worthy conduct coming out of the federal government right now, unfortunately. But we are definitely active in trying to block that. And I will say, I just want people to remember we have a constitutional democracy. We have 3 branches of government, and at the federal level right now, I think it's so critical that our courts step up to act as the check that they were intended to be on the political branches. And notwithstanding some high-profile exceptions that make the headlines in the news, that is happening regularly. And for the most part, courts are doing their job to act as the check, and we need them, and we need to as much as possible to continue to bring them cases where we can ask the courts to do their job to check this unconstitutional conduct. So we'll keep doing that, keep trying to build the record, including the medical evidence that was featured in the preliminary injunction, and keep up that work at the federal level. And at the same time, I think while we see so much being rolled back at the federal level, that creates extra opportunity for states and urgency at the state level to really become a leader in this renewable energy space. So I think it underscores why cases like this case in Wisconsin are really important now as the federal government kind of steps back from its role in addressing climate change. The good news is, as Jonathan Paz was just mentioning, like renewables energy, even if you don't care at all about climate change, renewables make the most sense right now. They are the cheapest form of energy. So there's a lot of opportunities for states like Wisconsin and other states to really step into this space, embrace renewable energy and all the benefits, the economic benefits, the health benefits, the job benefits that come with that. So we'll keep pushing state level, federal level, internationally, and stay after it.
Yeah, I'll just mention one thing at the federal level. 114 scientists that specifically work on climate change and health effects submitted a public comment to show the scientific evidence to counter EPA's reconsideration of the endangerment finding that climate change endangers public health. So scientists are really stepping forward with evidence against that.
Thanks, Jonathan. As we're talking about, state and federal interplay, I'll maybe just add to what Nate said about the fact that we live in a constitutional democracy. We also live in a federal democracy, and we have a state sovereign and state constitution that is different than the federal government and different than the federal constitution. And there are aspects of our state constitution that I think are uniquely powerful in this litigation and in cases like this, especially the public trust doctrine and the obligation of the state to protect the waters of the state forever for all generations of Wisconsinite, and the fact that Article 1, Section 1 explicitly talks about the inherent rights that we have as Wisconsinites. And I guess I'd also say, when the Public Service Commission is approving new fossil fuel power plants and creating a situation where all of us in Wisconsin have to pay for them, it's doing so in our name as Wisconsinites under the power of the state government. And so that's a situation that we can uniquely address on the state level. Jonathan, you've done work on climate change in terms of research and communications and talking to health professionals and other audiences. How do you think about something like this action? What do you think about the importance of young people getting involved in legal actions like this case and going to the courts and talking about the health impacts that they are experiencing? How would you put that into perspective in terms of its importance in this moment right now?
To me, I think it's one of the most important, if not the most important, step forward as far as bringing the reality that health harms are central to climate change dialogue, and that to really highlight the impact that this is having on people's health and especially children's health. And this is where there's tremendous power that young people have. They are less jaded, they are less, marginalized, they are more innocent, and they are coming forward with a real challenge that is, will affect them more than an old guy like me. Even though climate change is here, it's not future anymore. It is happening right now. The climate attribution science has advanced, so we can say that 2021 heat dome was virtually impossible to have happened, to be so extreme without human-caused climate change. So for the youth to come forward and say how much this is damaging their health and their future, to me, it's game-changing. I mean, when Montana case succeeded at the state Supreme Court, I've been working on this for 30 years. I think that was a landmark decision, and to me, this is the most important game in town. And I'm really grateful to the youth who are stepping forward, and to Tony, to Midwest Environmental Advocates, and of course to our Children's Trust. This is essential, and it's really so critical that it keeps moving this way.
Thank you for saying that, Jonathan. And speaking of Held v. Montana, there's a nice comment here in the chat from someone with the last name Held, who says Ricky Held and her family were originally from Racine and Kenosha, that being the lead plaintiff in Held v. Montana. And she says hello, and we're so proud of all of you. So Nate and your clients and Held, you get that praise from Jonathan and from others, and we're happy to claim just a small piece of that victory here in Wisconsin by way of Ricky. So that's really great to know. Thanks for that comment in the chat. Um, we're quickly approaching the end of our time together. I want to maybe throw one more question to Karina before we wrap up. But does anyone have anything else that they want to make sure that they get um, into the record here? Any other last comments or statements? No? Okay, well, Karina, I just want to ask you if you could, what you would tell other young people out there, other families who are concerned about climate change. I've seen in the chat here a number of people say, "You're awesome, you're an inspiration." What is it that you'd want to say back to folks?
I would say, kind of going back to how I got involved with climate activism, is to really start local and to look at the things, around you that not only that you can change, but that you can bring awareness about. For me, that was giving speeches at my local Earth Fair. I went up on stage, I gave speeches about plastic bag usage in our community. I gave speeches about PFAS contamination on different well sites, all when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. Um, and truly researching was a big thing for me, researching ways that other youth are impacted in all parts of the world. But also not to let these things drag me down, to still look at the great things in my community that hold me up. Spending time in the Mississippi River, spending time with friends, spending time at my grandparents' tree farm, going on hikes and gardening. I would say a really good mix is a great thing, to be very aware of what's going on in the world, but to also stay content with what you have. And then also, as youth and families are maybe like growing older into teenage years, looking at projects that they can bring to the community. For me, my biggest, I would say, almost accomplishment to this date was planning an entire summer camp for youth to learn about healthy living and healthy eating through different businesses in the community and different farms. So altogether, I would say looking to things that you're passionate about, or to things that you think you might be interested in about, and researching those ideas, researching ways that you could bring it to your community. And then finally, I brought this to the state level with this lawsuit. But I think that truly great things such as this lawsuit start with very small community-led and personal change. And then it just blossoms into something so much greater, such as what we have going on here. And yeah.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of questions in the chat here. One person asks, "How can we help?" And then another person says, "I'm in Boston. Is there a way to support the effort other than through money?" So I'll throw that question out to anyone who wants to respond. How can folks support this litigation and this effort?
I'm happy to start. Well, first of all, I mean, just you being here tonight really means a lot to us. I think to the plaintiffs too. This work is hard. There is often pushback, and it's really meaningful to have your support. Even just showing up tonight, it's really significant. Beyond that, money does help if you have money. These cases do take a lot of resources. So that is always one thing. But short of that, we're always looking for partners who have expertise in various subject matter related to climate impacts, not just on public health impacts like Jonathan Patz, but the various other sorts of ways climate change is impacting natural resources, the environment. So anybody who has expertise on that. And then just partner organizations or partner individuals that want to help when we have key decision points in the case. When we have hearings, it's always nice to help turn people out for hearings. You can help spread the news of the case through your own communities. Share our email lists. Sign up for our email lists if you're not already on them. Is a great way to kind of stay in the loop as kind of more opportunities to help out arise. So, and if you have ideas too, we're always welcome to hear your ideas. We've had people create art about our cases in the past. So there's lots of opportunities to get creative in terms of how to spread the news, raise awareness, and continue to influence the discussion around this topic. And then just quickly, Tony, if I can, to kind of touch on a couple other questions I saw about kind of precedent, both at the international level and the state level. And I think
Absolutely.
yeah, were you going to say something on that?
Also, if you want to transition into what's next in the case, then we'll probably end there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, there's litigation around climate change happening around the world at international bodies like the United Nations. And all of that is really important to building this body of law to hold governments accountable, to hold in some instances to hold polluters accountable. And what we're seeing is courts, even if a case isn't technically, legally binding on a court, courts are still looking to these other judicial bodies to influence their decisions. So we need this body of law to continue to develop at the state level, at the federal level, at the international level, and it is proving to be persuasive on courts that are increasingly asked to evaluate and look at these cases. And then in terms of what's next here in Wisconsin, we, as I said, we filed our case in August, and the next step is for the defendants, the Public Service Commission, and the legislature to respond to our complaint. And their deadline to do that is November 10th. So we have about a month, we will hear from them in terms of how they plan to defend the case, which is a typical response. They usually will kind of raise various objections to the case. So we don't really know what the response is at this point, but we will learn much more on November 10th and then plan our response and next steps accordingly. So please, again, sign up to our mailing lists at MEA and Our Children's Trust, and we'll keep you posted on what happens next, both in this case and other cases as well.
Thanks so much, Nate. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what you said, that folks can stay in touch by going to our respective websites. I think Peg will put some QR codes up on the screen here in just a minute, that link to our websites, and encourage folks to sign up for our newsletters and just learn more about our organizations if you don't already. I also want to say that I see in the chat and in the Q&A names of MEA supporters, and I'm sure there are also a number of supporters of Our Children's Trust. Thanks to all of you for helping make our advocacy and our work possible. As Nate said, it takes donations and support to be able to sustain this work, and you are a part of it. So thank you so much. And then lastly, I want to thank our panelists for being here and being part of this really inspiring evening that's going to carry us forward in this case for the remainder of the year and then beyond. So thank you all for being here, audience, panelists. It's just been a real pleasure to get to talk to you about Dunn v. Wisconsin PSC. Have a good night.